Genesis.
Hey, what's up? It's Genesis, and today I'm going to be breaking down my song Ghozt, which is going to be released soon under Bypass Audio with their upcoming compilation album Bypass Audio Volume 2. Before I do a breakdown, first of all, I need to go ahead and put all the files back to where they were, because believe it or not, this project began, let's see here, last year. So this song is over a year old. I thank Bypass for the opportunity of releasing this track with them and in their compilation album. So I'm just going to run it down in terms of drums, harmonic section, then the bass, and then the effects. So yeah, without further ado, let's get going. Also, if you'd like to get some of these sounds, I'll be posting some of these on Patreon if you'd like, and link to the Patreon will be in the description below. Alright, first of all, let's start with the drums, so the main drums and the percussion. For the intro, we have just a very simple cymbal with some dotted eighth delay on it and some reverb. And this is done with my washout rack. And you can get this washout rack for free on my website if you have Ableton. The link for that will also be in the description below. On the same track, I added a percussion which acts as a clap. On the second half of the intro, or the build-up, I have this drum break, which is getting filtered in with the washout rack, and also gradually gets frequency shifted. Here's the automation. And I've also chopped up the drum break so it's not like a full-on busy break. Underneath that I have the percussion that was from the first half of the intro, as well with this added percussion underneath the snare hits of the drum break, just to give it a sense of a snare whilst this gets filtered in. And also I have this reverb hi-hat which will slowly come to the forefront, again automating the washout rack here. And then we have these drums, which are inspired by City on Lock, featuring Ryder Shafiq by QZB. I'll play a very quick sample of it just in case this is what the drums sound like on that tune.
You feel like you know me, but you know.
So I wanted to get the kick and the snap in there, because I liked how stripped back it was, and it allows more of the bass to shine through. So I've got the kick and snap, as well as hi-hats on every little beat. And I've got some variation every now and then. And in terms of percussion, I have a crash on every 8 bars. And it's not a crash that rings out, because I feel like a crash that rings out makes the whole track sound a bit too wet. I want this song to be a little more dry and in your face. So having just a very short crash can help give that impact on the first beat, but also let everything else breathe and not be overly washed out. And then just a few fillers here every now and then, just to keep the whole drum loop interesting. I have this quick 16th note tambourine. And then I got some chops of the drum break from earlier, as well as some other drum breaks layered on top. And then here I've got another fill, but I've also started switching up the main drums a little bit. In the second half, it's pretty much the same drum loop, but I've continued more of the fast tambourines on the back. Also leaving some space after every 2 bars, sense of a breath there for the drums to breathe. You know, And this is the drum fill that indicates the next section of the drop. This is how the drum break sounds like on its own. I'm chopping the drums in a way I would actually do a drum fill. I want to keep the main drum groove in there, while also adding a few more ghost notes and a few more double kicks and accents there. And the accents are where the regular kick and snare would usually be. And I also made the accents a bit more prominent with these crashes layered underneath. And then of course you have the tambourines and that little bit of texture there. For the main drums, pretty much following the same kind of rhythm for the drum break. And I've also added a snare here. And that will get layered with the drum break. And the extra snares on the main drums act as like a ghost note thing as well. Next section, pretty much the same, but with a ride cymbal attached to it. Again, not on every single beat, so the beat can breathe. I feel like one of the biggest things in terms of like making drum grooves or like most EDM songs nowadays is that they don't really let the songs breathe. They don't let their instrumental parts breathe. I grew up listening to some like older music, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, and a bit of 90s because of my parents. One common thing that I pretty much found was like in the instrumentation, they always let some of their elements breathe. Like for example, in funk, not every instrument is playing the entire time. They always let the other instruments breathe and they interplay off each other. Having some rests spread out throughout each individual part of the drums can also let the rest of the elements, like the bass, the other harmonic stuff in your EDM production, like breathe and have a sense of life. Some people like to call it call and response. I think of it like when you're speaking. You're not always like waffling your words out. You give yourself some time to breathe, you give yourself some time to listen to the other person that you're conversing to, and it becomes a nice uniform conversation. And then after that, it's pretty much the same thing again, but this time I added a drum break underneath, which is heavily affected here. I've got a drum break that is being high passed, and then I've got a gate that's making it sound a lot more dry, you know, getting rid of that airy space in between. And then I've got this utility, which makes it a little bit, excuse me, which makes it feel a bit more centered. And then a dot delay, just to give it some more stereo space and also to make the accents in the drum loop a little bit more interesting. And then I have this mid-side utility just to constrict some of that extra wideness that's been added from the ping pong delay. And then I've got a soft gate again to make it even tighter. And then the flanger is what gives it that movement. The flanger on drums for movement is I wouldn't say it's a pretty old school thing, but it's a very 90s and 2000s kind of thing, in my opinion. If you like listen to some old school breakbeat or like more of like mainstream breakbeat back in the day, you can hear a lot of this on drum breaks. Kind of wanted to give an homage there. I also added a few snares into the mix now, just to elevate the groove a little bit more, give it some more energy. And that's pretty much the same thing as you can see for the rest of the song, except that other than in the breakdown, there's just a few more added drums compared to the intro. You can see the intro percussions stay the same, but I added a few elements like carrying on the main drums and layering it on with the drum break. Keep it nice and simple. It's pretty much a drum and bass roller, so you know the main thing about drum and bass rollers is the reason why it's called a roller is because the beat just continues to go forward, it rolls on, which also gives space for the basses to shine through and to be more interesting in that area. So let's move on to the harmonic stuff. And there's not much going on pretty much. For the harmonic stuff, we have this this underlying soundscape here. I have this brass serum patch here, which is being washed out with some reverb and some delay, again with my washout rack. And this is what the serum patch looks like. So here I'm just using the good old Juno Sawtooth, and this is what it sounds like without the washout rack. So pretty much I have if I turn off the filter and all the effects here. It's just a Juno sawtooth. You can never go wrong with a Juno synths, in my opinion. They always sound so warm. I've got the first envelope, gotten a bit of an attack to it and a bit of release to it. So it can fade in and it doesn't like have a sharp attack. And then I'm using the second envelope as the filter modulation here. And now it sounds more like a brass. I've got detune on it a little bit, just to give it some stereo width and some chorusy kind of effects to it. And I have the center voice being a bit louder than the side voices, because then it strengthens that that mono signal a little bit more. And that's pretty much it for this patch. And then of course the washout does the rest of the job. Pretty nice. I then also have this underlying serum string kind of thing going on. I mean, it's not really a string, but you know what I mean. For the serum patch, what I have is noise, which is going through a filter with key tracking on. And this technique is pretty useful for like having very textural, but like a relatively clean tonal note as well. And the stronger the resonance is, the more of that tonal frequency you get, and the less resonant it is, the more of the noise you get. So pretty much what I have is this LFO controlling the cutoff a little bit, and I also have key tracking on, and the MIDI note is playing the key of the song, which is F, and this LFO is slowly drifting that note. And of course I've got the washout rack, just to give it a little bit more of that space. And then I have cymatics. Wow, cymatics. Actually pretty good. I've got this vocal ambience thing going on, and I've got the washout rack doing the majority of the work, as per usual. I've got the low cut going, and allowing just some of the highs through. And after that I have a frequency shifter on the whole thing. That rises up to give it some tension. And same thing, I guess, throughout the entire thing, so that is what it is. Alright, now we're going to the basses, which is pretty much what everyone is always after. But this is how it is on the intro. I have this brass stab made on operator, which is going through a lot of stuff. Oh my days. And this brass stab is also on the second half of the drop, which is this. So pretty much what's going on here for this brass stab, if I turn everything off, we'll start with the operator. It's pretty much all sine waves. We have the main sub frequency going on first, and then we have FM like a few octaves up, and it has an envelope just to give it that movement. And then I have a third FM oscillator here. That's the same tuning as the sub or the first oscillator, and it gives it that jittering quality. And the final thing that makes it sound like a brass is this fourth FM oscillator, which is also the same frequency again, but this time at full volume, and that gives it more of a lower tone. I then have this EQ. Get rid of the sub, because then I've got a separate sub playing the low notes already, and then scooping out some of that high mid, so then I can give space for other elements to shine through. I've then got this corpus, and it gives it that tail. And I've got the tuning of the corpus being tracked by the MIDI, and you can do this by opening up this side menu. And I know it's different on Ableton Live 11, but since I'm using 10, this is how it is. I'm pretty sure you can find the same kind of setting somewhere. But once you have that on, you select your MIDI, and then check how you want it to track the MIDI notes. Like, do you want to track the latest MIDI notes, or do you want to track only the lowest MIDI note? And I've set it to the latest, and I've matched it to be in the lower bass octaves. And I'm using pipe mode because usually that gives me the best resonance for lower bassy tones and has a nice release in my opinion. Tubes can also have a similar effect, but it's more of like a odd harmonic squarey kind of tone if you're looking for that. But if you want more of like an even harmonic kind of tone, then you can use pipe. And it sounds more like a saw wave kind of resonance. There's also this corpus, which gets turned on the second drop. And it just gives it that extra overtone to make it a bit more interesting. And I change it up every now and then as well. Okay, we have got an EQ, doing a similar thing to the first EQ. I've got an OTT as well, just to change the dynamics a little bit. A phaser, I guess, to give it some more of a... Ooh, give it some movement. Okay, I'm using the envelope tracker on phaser just so it can do that movement by itself. And I've got an EQ, which is accenting more of that resonance that the phaser is giving. And I'm pushing back some more high end. An ozone imager to finally bring out some width to this mono sound. And then I'm using an EQ to tame the low end, which has some side frequencies after the ozone imager. And then saturator to drive that, give it some aggression. And that saturator finally gives it some of that bite that I was looking for. Compressor. I don't know why it's there, it's not really doing much. EQ. Some reverb to give it some space. And then finally a washout rack, which gets turned on during the intro and breakdown. Finally, for the sustain bass, it's actually made of 3 parts. You've got this top layer, this mid layer, and the sub. Alright, so with this top layer, which is an operator again, going through a bunch of stuff. Let's start with just operator only. This is what it sounds like. It's pretty much the same patch as the brass patch that we went through just now, except that I've changed the coarse tuning, and I've also changed the level on the other oscillators here. And every now and then I change the coarse tuning right there, just to give it some different tonalities. I didn't use this erosion so I can get out of here. You've got this vocoder, which is going pretty intense and cutting a lot of stuff out, but pretty much it's just vocoder on modulator mode and depth on max and bands on 40, and nothing else has changed. And it's just doing that. I've got this frequency shifter, of which brings it down every now and then with some different tonalities. And over here I changed the operator coarse tuning just to give it some more stepwise movement, and I've got an auto pan to give it that sextuplet kind of rhythm there. And even though it's really quiet, it gets brought up a lot by this OTT. There it is. And then I've got an EQ that brings up more of that mid-range. Yeah, like around here. And then we've got the second layer. Again, copying and pasting that same patch of the brass. That's what the patch sounds like. And in terms of my old style of sound design, since this song is like over a year old now, what I used to do a lot is to use a signal that has a lot of high information, like this one, if you can hear that little raspiness in the top. And usually what I do is that I target those frequencies, and I bring it down a whole tone with the frequency shifter. And then after that I use a vocoder to tame the rest of the muddy frequencies. And now I've only got this kind of grating middle end that will layer pretty well with the really high sustain that we just went through earlier. Flanger just to give it some movement. Phaser as well. Same deal. frequency shifter for some variation later on, which is right here. Auto pan for that 6-2-plit vibe again. And then the OTT brings it out a lot. Oh yeah. Another frequency shifter for some more controlled movement. And then an EQ to bring up more mid-end. And then layering that on top with the high end here. Yeah, and the main body comes from the sub. Woo! Alright, the sub is also made through operator. This is what the operator patch sounds like. And pretty much what I did is I have an attack so it doesn't click in. And I also drew in a few odd harmonics here, and it just gives it more power. I remember seeing a few Mr. Bill clips, and he was teaching about how to make a sound loud, I guess. And he compared like technically a very loud click, which only lasts like a few milliseconds. It's so loud it makes the master go red, and then he compares it with a sound that's a little bit longer, but does not make the master go red. But because that sound is longer, it is a lot easier to perceive it as loud.
And I'll prove that for you right now. Tell me which one you think's louder. This is example 1. Everybody hear that? And then here's example number 2. So which one's louder? And clearly the second one, right?
So his theory is that the more space time-wise a sound takes up in amplitude, then the louder it will sound.
A lot of the problem that they have is it just doesn't like punch quite enough and it doesn't sound quite loud enough. And the reason why is because it's not loud enough for a long enough period of time. So I would personally define loudness, and I think this is probably the best way to define it, as loudness over time. So how do we, say, achieve this on the level of like subs?
And the main premise for his subs is that compared to just a pure sine wave, right? If you take a look at this waveform here, adding in more odd harmonics can widen up that sine wave, and it can therefore take up more space amplitude-wise over time. And because of that, it sounds more powerful and louder. So if you compare that to a simple sine wave, and then drawing in some odd harmonics, it perceivably sounds a little bit louder.
And this trick was actually shown to me by Copycat. The solution to this is to like add harmonics to your sub, right? So let's adjust that and take a look at the oscilloscope. And the idea here, what I'm looking for here, is just to try and make this waveform look like it's loud for the longest period of time. Cool, that's pretty good right there. All right, cool. So now that is louder for longer than this, right? We've added volume to it over time on like this really macro single cycle level.
So that's the kind of thing I do with my subs that I took from him. Thank you very much, Mr. Bill. After that, I have a saturator. Again, pretty much doing the same thing, give it more power. And then I have an erosion and another saturator at the end, which gets turned on and off at some points. And then we have this blaring sub. And I have this erosion that turns on the sustain areas, just to give that main bass a little bit more of a clean high end. And then on the 6-2-plit kind of areas, I've turned both of them off. This is what it sounds like with both of them on. It just gets a bit too aggressive. So sometimes automating some effects that I have on the sub can help everything else above it. And then for the other things I have on the overtone layer, and the reason why I call it overtones instead of the bass layer is because sometimes most of these sounds aren't actually basses. Like, that's not a bass on its own, but paired with the sub, it is a bass. I've got a cowbell. And the reason for adding a cowbell is because this song actually started as a joke track, mainly because I think around 2018 to something 2021, there was this like running joke in drum and bass where cowbells were just added for the crack. It was just like a funny sound, you know, that they slipped in, kind of like just how like some jazz musicians use the lick, some drum and bass producers used a cowbell, and I wanted to do that because it's funny. But I didn't really want to just put it in there. I kind of wanted it to be in the same key as well. So I made sure to pitch it in key. I have it going through a saturator, to make it blaringly loud, and an OTT as well. Just so I can bring out some more of that high end and tame that mid end as well. And then an EQ to do the same thing. And then got some reverb as well. This gate can get out of here because I'm not using it. I also have this little thing here as a fill. All it is a saw wave that has a bit of a high pass filter there. And it's bringing out that 5th harmonic that's being played in that saw wave. And I also have this decagon rack, which is an alternative to disperser that I've made for Ableton users, and it doesn't use any third-party plugins. So if you don't have disperser and you'd like an alternative, I've got this rack that you can get for free on my website as well. Link in the description below as well, as per usual. I also have an EQ, just to tame some of that resonance a little bit, and an OTT to bring out some more of that high end. On the second quarter of the drop, we also have this layer over here that accompanies these sextuplet layers here. It's a very simple patch. It's just operator again. I've got just the main sub oscillator, and then I've got this other FM oscillator, which is an integer multiplier of 2, but I've got a few other harmonics that I added here, just to give it some more harmonics, I guess. This is what it sounds like with just a regular sine wave. That's FMing that sub, but if I have a few of those on, it gives it more body, and of course the auto pan. EQ to tame that resonance. And of course I automate the coarse pitch as well, every now and then. And I also use it as this filler here. Sometimes you don't always have to like use a new element or make a new thing for a fill. Use what you have. So then it's a lot more consistent with the rest of your tune, and also makes you be more creative of what you use as fills. And then there's this extra layer here. It's the same exact patch as the other one, but this time I've added an attack to it and a bit of a chorus for some movement. This compressor is not doing anything, so we can get out of here. Oh no, there's just one more. This other layer here. It's this operator patch yet again, but this time I'm using a square wave on as the sub oscillator here. And then I'm FMing that with a saw wave that's 3 octaves higher. And it gives it that nasty screaming overtone, which is crazy. EQ. Got rid of that sub, dipped some of the high end so the rest of the sustains can take up that space. And I've also turned it down with the gain knob here, and then have this decagon rack again. This time I'm using it to give more of that scoop to that body of that sound. It's more of a "ewe" instead of a "we," it's "ewe." And then I've got Ozone Imager to give it some stereo width, and then chorus to give that stereo width some movement. This compressor is not doing anything, get out of here. And then of course an auto pan, so we can have that rhythm there. Square thing. It's a very simple patch again. Square wave, no attack, short decay, EQ to tame out that the fundamental. Very snappy compressor so it can cut through the mix a little bit more. And some reverb just to give it some space. There's this other sub as well. And this is for the brass stabs. It's pretty much the same sub again, but this time I'm using soft saturation on the filter section, just to give it a bit more aggression. You can hear the added frequencies on top. And then we have this vocal of Ghozt, and that's just me saying Ghost. Tuned down a lot. Ghost. See? It's just me. But yeah, I've tuned it down a lot. Put it in time of the song. Reduce ambience preset on Ableton. just to clean it up a little bit. Vocoder, just to give it some interesting high end there. OTT to bring it out. EQ just to change the tone up a little bit more. And a saturator to give it some aggression. And then in terms of effects, we've got this. This is just some noise, but with only the high end coming through. And then just a lot of layers of risers and fallers. Layer your risers and fallers. Get some more texture in them. I've carried on this atmosphere from the intro with the drop as well, but I also leave some of that space. That's also in tune with the drums. Yeah, just let the beat breathe a little bit. And just this little difference in the drop, having a little bit of noise atmosphere in the back, can make the rest of the song sound full. This is it without it. That's too dry for me. Adding it in. Adds that little bit more tension, and I love that. And then simple risers and fills and stuff. And that's that. And one more thing in terms of sidechain, because I have had questions about that on my Discord server recently. If you want to join my Discord, link for that is in the description below as well. I have the sidechain set up like this. And the signal that's being used as sidechain is this. And that comes from the drum channel with this sidechain little sub channel over here. The way that I have this set up is I have the usual drums over here. And then on a separate channel, I have a scale plugin, which allows me to select which drums that are being used in the drum rack to trigger the sidechain. And right now I have it always kicked to the kick and the snare, which I set to C and E. And there's a kick right here in C, and the snare in E, or the snap in this case. And then I have macros to control how fast I want the sidechain attack to be for these notes. As well as the decay of these notes as well. And of course I can further control the sidechain trigger through these attack and decay knobs as well. So if I have it all the way at the lowest attack and release, that's how long the actual sidechain trigger is. Adjusting the attack and release here controls these soft curves, whereas controlling the attack and release over here gives us more like sharp rounded curves. I can get pretty surgical here. Stuff like this. I'm gonna make a more detailed video about this sometime soon on how to make something like this in your Ableton project files on my YouTube channel, so please stay tuned for that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this project file. But yeah, this is pretty much how I make my tracks, especially with Ghozt, and that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like and sub to buff mine and Bypass Audio's algorithm RNG, leave a comment if you have something to say, and maybe shout out to someone you think will find this useful. You can further support me and Bypass Audio by checking out all the links in the description below. This will include my official website, my Discord, Bypass's Discord, my social medias, Bypass's social medias, as well as my Patreon. And in my Patreon you can see a ton of pretty cool exclusive stuff, which will include some of the sounds that were used in this project file, as well as a personal shout out. I would like to give a massive shout out to Feelstorer for being an absolute legend, and thank you for being my first ever Patreon. Once again, thanks a lot for watching, and stay creative. See you in a bit.